Rosted.
Here.
And if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I acknowledge this meeting was posted and noticed according to law.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I would look for a motion to approve tonight's agenda minus item number 2 under consent agenda. There are no mayoral appointments tonight.
I'll make a motion with the amendment to move, approve it.
Alder Motive will second to approve the agenda without the mayoral appointments.
Okay, a motion by Alder Rosted and a second by Alder Motive to approve tonight's agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And tonight for correspondence and communications, is there anything of anybody signed up? There is not. Okay, then we would have the 2023 audit presentation by Baker and Tilley. Yeah, yeah. Correspondence. I got.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Amanda Blomberg. I'm a director at Baker Tilly, and I oversee the city's financial audit. In your packets, you would have received a copy of the financial statements. It's a lot of pages. So I did have a benchmark, a graphs package handed out to you for the meeting that we'll do our talking from this evening. Also in your packets, you would have gotten a summary of audit results, which has some required communications from the auditors, as well as discussions on internal controls and upcoming reporting changes that you can expect. So feel free to look through that. And if you have any questions, let me know. So what we'll do is, like I said, the financial statements are kind of a complex document. It includes all of the governmental activities that occur that are under the umbrella of the city, as well as the sewer utility and the water and light utility. I'm going to be focusing on those city activities tonight. So if we look at the handout that came out to you tonight, we'll flip to the first page, and this is a discussion of the general fund balance. This is a point of reference. It's a great thing to look at to see how this is doing over the course of time. Kind of helps you see how things are going, how healthy the city in general is. When you think about the general fund, it takes a majority of the tax levy, has a lot of the operating, normal year-to-year operating costs occurring there. So it's a big fund. It gets a lot of attention internally and externally. Fund balance is essentially your equity in that fund. And so there's a lot of different funds that the city manages. You see them in the budget documents. But the general fund is just one piece of that, like I said. And the fund balance is whatever the assets minus the liabilities are for that year. So equity is another way to look at it. The graph that you see at the top of page 1 divides that fund balance into various categories. So the top line, you'll see a comparison of 2022's totals to 23's totals there. And then you see a total at the top, and then it's broken down into 3 different categories down the bottom there. Total fund balance for the year increased just over $600,000. That's a pretty substantial increase. A good chunk of that, about $415,000, related to the sale of some city property that occurred in 23. That is not a normal source of revenue, so that's not really something that we would see every year. So the year's income was a little inflated because of that. But when we take that out, we still have an income or an increase of fund balance of about $192,000. So that is, again, a good increase. When we look at the different fund balance categories under here, if we start at the bottom at non-spendable, that is the least liquid. It's actually unliquid. You can't, you can't liquidate the assets that are in there because we may have already paid for some health insurance. We might have some long-term type receivables that are in there that we can't just, collect at the current time. So the non-spendable fund balance increased a little bit over last year. About $100,000, and that really was related to some increases in the advances that go to the TIF districts, namely TIF 6 was the bigger one. That is really common practice as TIFs are getting started. Some of those early administrative costs that occur usually have to be paid by some source before those increments start coming in at a later year. So that's pretty typical. A little bit of extra costs in TIF 6 this year that increase that non-spendable and those related advances. If we go up the chart, we see a couple of blank lines, but then we see assigned and unassigned. And those are much more liquid. They're assets or reserves that we have on hand that we have some control over as the council. The assigned is essentially dedicated for specific purposes, whether it be next year's budget or, for example, the big increase here was really the recognition of that land sale that happened that I talked about earlier. That got put into assigned because we have a plan for that. So that is sitting there, and I think the council, if you remember, you approved a resolution that assigned that to a specific purpose. And then the rest of the fund balance increase just falls to the unassigned, and that is your fund balance that's free and clear. It's available to be used for any purpose going forward. Does anybody have any questions on the fund balance or what we've discussed so far? In the middle of that page, you'll see just a very summarized income statement. Revenues minus expenditures for the year. You'll see the actual compared to what the final budget looked like. You'll see that the final budget had planned a usage of fund balance, and you actually ended up much better off than that. All right, if you go to page 2, this is looking at your fund balance trending over time. And so the city has a policy where that unassigned number that we talked about on the previous page, the goal is to have that fall between 10 to 25% of the general fund expenditures in any given year. So if you think about, well, we spent about $4 million last year, so you can kind of ballpark what that is in your head. But this graph will show where that range is. So we have a black line and kind of a light blue line where that range is and where we want that fund balance to fall. That red line that you see there is that unassigned fund balance. So you'll see for the most part it's fallen within that desired range. Popped a little bit above it in 23, little bit more income than we anticipated, I think, but that is not a bad thing. That green line that you see at the top is a combination of the assigned and unassigned. That's also another important external people will look at that, those two numbers together. So it's good to see how those look and stack up over time as well. And you can see that those percentages are much higher than what that unassigned is all by itself. So, you're hitting your goals. The fund balance for general fund is sitting where it needs to be or where you want it to be. When we take into account the unassigned and the assigned, you're much higher than that. The minimum recommendation is generally to be around 17%, and you've been either right at that or actually the green line 17%, and you've been about double that over the last 5 years. So good shape. Any questions on that?
What are the blue dots?
Those are just benchmarks. We keep this data for kind of our client load, and we compare you to where, like, the median of similar sized communities, where their fund balances are falling. So you can kind of get a sense, are you kind of in line with them, or way above or below? And in this case, you're kind of right in the middle.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's turn to page 3. Here we're going to talk about general obligation debt. This is another area that is of particular interest. Obviously, you don't want to have too much debt, right? So general obligation debt is the type of debt that is secured by the tax levy. There's a maximum that any municipality in the state can issue in general obligation debt, and that is a calculation of 5% of your equalized value. So obviously that changes over time. As your equalized value goes up, so does your debt capacity or your debt limit. That number is depicted in this chart on page 3 by the black line. So you see generally that moves up over time as the equalized value also increases. The green line is the actual amount of general obligation debt outstanding. And you'll see in the table at the bottom, there's a general obligation column, and you'll see that the city has the majority of that, about almost $8 million. The utilities have a small portion of that. I'll even delve a little bit further that out of that city total, about 1.3 million of that is related to TIF debt. So the TIF is actually repaying that as the increment is generated there. But with all of that said, you're at 26% of your debt limit as of the end of 23. And that has, let's see. And I mean, that I think has stayed pretty steady over time. You'll see how the actual debt and that green line has actually decreased about 1.7 million over the last 5 years. So you've definitely decreased that, but it was not ever, super high over those past 5 years. A good benchmark to use here is if you're getting to 50% of your debt limit, you need to kind of watch it a little bit. Your policy actually indicates you don't want to go over 75% of your debt limit. I don't see a lot of communities that high, so I would recommend even, kind of keeping it even below that. Unless you're experiencing a lot of growth, sometimes we do see that. That table at the bottom does indicate, like I said, the total general obligation debt. The amount of revenue debt is also presented there. The revenue debt is really only owed by the utilities because that's secured by the customer charges that go to that are charged to the sewer and the water and light customers. All right, let's turn the next page to page 4. This is another way to look at debt service and payment on that GO debt. And these percentages show you how much of your annual expenses across all of your governmental funds are compared to your debt payments. So when we take what you're paying in principal and interest and compare that to your total operating expenses for the year, you get a percentage. And so that percentage has ranged from about 18.5 down to 13.4% in this last year. So debt payments went down. I think in 22 there was an early retirement of some debt, and so that was probably a little elevated back in 22, but in 23 the total payments came down quite a bit. what was I going to say there? So a good benchmark to use here is if your total percentage, your principal and interest compared to the rest of your expenses is falling under 20%, you're sitting pretty good. You're not overextending yourself. You're not having a large majority or a large part of your budget going to pay that debt on an annual basis. So in summary, when we're looking at your fund balance, we're looking at your general obligation debt, you're kind of hitting all the marks there. I think it's been that way. I haven't seen any issues in the last, many years as I've presented. So, that just indicates that, we're watching, what we're spending, we're keeping our, making good budgets and sticking with them, and making sure that we can fund the projects, that we're putting that we're completing out there. Any questions?
I do.
Okay.
In reading through the reporting and insights, and that's where I'm going to focus, and Matt, some of these questions may weigh in for your answer. And before I get into them, I want to apologize. I left my questions at home on my table, so my son took a picture and sent them to me on my phone. So I apologize for looking at my phone. In reading through, it's my understanding that there's an internal controls weakness within the city's accounting department. And I do understand that the cost of internal controls is just a lot of time due to a lack of personnel, or a lack of funding to pay new employees. But I'm very concerned that this has been coming up for many years, and we have many departments that are doing duplicate job duties. And would the city be better off to have a centralized accounting department so that we can have more employees in to segregate those duties, and also to be on the same accounting platform?
I would say that it depends. So it is really hard for smaller communities to completely segregate duties. When we think of those communities or governments that are able to do that, I think of counties that have an accounting department and don't do anything else. The fact that in most smaller communities, you have someone who has to fill in for someone when another person is gone. That is a segregation of duties issue. We don't have that in the larger governments as much. As far as, centralized accounting, I mean, that's not a bad thing. I think the only thing that's separated is probably the utilities, right?
No. Well, yeah.
I mean, finance operations and other departments are very minimal from my experience over the years here. So most of it is pretty centralized here, except for utilities as far as I'm aware. But I mean, whatever you can do to centralize and kind of oversee some of those financial operations, I think is definitely a positive thing. I think, if you added a bunch of staff, you might be able to get over this. But I'm not sure that that's the best use of resources all of the time. I would say that, thinking about, I've worked on the city's audit for a lot of years, and I would say things are about as good as they've ever been here, as far as having few items that we've picked out that are causing that weakness. So there's a lot of compensating controls that are in place right now that are kind of minimizing a lot of that, but when it's all said and done, it's still like we still have some crossover of the staffing and responsibilities that just can't really go away that easily.
Right. Especially with the reconciliation portion. I mean, is there a plan in place so that nobody is entering transactions and reconciling?
So I'm going to address this as clearly as I guess I can. And to not give away the spoiler of the strategic planning update later.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, I anticipate one of the things being an organizational study and looking at where we have duplication of efforts, where we need to look at succession planning, where we need to address issues like this. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's going to take time for us to get there. And I think the important thing, to take from the audit report, and as we move forward with implementation, getting to the implementation stage in 2025, hopefully, of the strategic plan, is that this is something everyone remembers as a reason why we may need to look at, assignment of duties, responsibilities, and as we move through that organizational study of keeping this in the back of your mind.
And then I have one other question, if you don't mind. On page 7 of that same report, it talks about departmental controls, and in there it mentioned the separate bank accounts. And I know that the utilities and HLPC have separate bank accounts. My question is the city a signer on the HLPC accounts, and are they following the city's internal controls? And then I'm going to assume, and I know what they say about assuming, but the utility has its internal controls since they get audited, but HLPC does not.
I can comment that there are a few separate boards, HLPC being one. I think the library has one and the cemetery has one, that do have separate boards that do oversee their own accounts. They are brought into the city's financial statements. We get their information from them. It comes in. It's not significant compared to the rest of the city. So it does get some attention. We confirm their bank accounts. We do some audit procedures over the amount of money that they have and the ins and the outs, do some analysis and that kind of thing. I would say it's not subject to the same scrutiny, though.
Okay. I think that I would like to recommend that as you go through your strategic planning and your process, that we take a look at those items and ensure that all of the committees and commissions are following the city policies for banking and financial internal controls.
And I think more importantly, this draws to light that maybe in the past, some of those groups have been allowed to do some things that have put the city not just in a financial liability, but a legal liability. And we've got to look at overall ensuring that by no one's purposeful or trying to do this maliciously, but
Right.
making sure that we follow bid guidelines, procurement procedures, because the city has those in place, and technically those groups, although they've been allowed to operate in a looser structure, are city entities and need to follow the same, policies, procedures, and rules that the city department staff would have to.
Exactly. Well said.
Any other questions?
I've got one. From the findings of your audit, if there was one item that you said, hey, you should think about this for your strategic plan for the next 1 to 3 years, what would that be?
From an audit perspective, I would say making sure that, given that the utilities have kind of their own finance staff, making sure that you're talking to each other, and you're corresponding. If they pay you for something and they owe you something, you know what that is, and vice versa, and it's very clear as to what that is.
Okay, no other questions? All right, thank you very much,
All
Amanda.
right, thank you for having me.
And then we will move on to the consent agenda, which is the council workshop minutes of June 20th, 2024, council and special committee of the whole and committee of the whole minutes from July 2nd of 2024.
Alder Rolke will move to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, motion by Alder Rolke and a second by Alder Rosted to approve tonight's consent agenda. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda approved. On to new business, and that is to consider and take action on the alcohol license application for Magnolia's Mexican Grill and Bar LLC.
Aldermotive.
I'll move to approve the alcohol license application for Magnolia's Mexican Grill and Bar LLC.
Aldermotive will second.
Okay, a motion by Alder Finkler and a second by Alder Motif to approve the alcohol license application. Is there any further from you, Susan, on this item?
We are in conversation between staff. Fire Chief Hazelton is waiting to hear back from Miss Magnolia, and as soon as he hears from her, he'll do a final inspection to make sure the last 2 boxes are checked off, and then she'll be good to go. But I know she's painting and working on the interior as we speak.
Okay. So I would say that we could go through and approve this motion contingent on the final report of the Chief Hazeltine. So any discussion?
Actually alter that.
Yep.
Alter it? Okay.
It would be preferred.
Okay.
I will move to amend for approval of the alcohol license application for Magnolia's Mexican Grill and Bar LLC once Chief Hazeltine approves his
Yes.
pending final fire inspection.
Aldermotive will second.
Okay, then Alder Finkler motioned and Alder Motif seconded with the final approval through Chief Hazeltine. Any further discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
It's a very good question.
She amended her own motion,
I think
so,
you're all good.
yeah.
Move on.
Okay. Item number 2, consider and take action on the certified survey map, CSM, for 366 East Poet Street and 807 Farnham Street of Columbus, Wisconsin. And this was gone over last week, just an adjustment in the property line, so.
Alder Rolke will move to approve the CSM for 366 East Poet Street and 807 Farnham Street.
Second?
Okay, motion by Alder Rolke and a second by Alder Finkler to approve the CSM. Any further discussion on this item? Mike?
I don't have any comments, but
Oh, yeah,
I was
Jerry.
just trying.
Okay, gotcha, all right. Yes, and that, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then next is to take and consider and take action on the facade grant program guideline revisions.
I'll move to approve the facade grant program guideline revisions.
Motive will-
Motion by Alder Finkler and a second by Alder Reed to approve the facade grant program guideline revisions. Any discussion, further discussion on this item?
Yeah.
You're just ready, right?
No, I do have.
Oh, you do have a comment? Okay.
Just one comment here. One thing I did get clarification on is one thing that was left out in this policy is it doesn't clearly say that the city council's the final approver of the facade grant guidelines. So I would recommend that you add that to the motion. Sorry. And because it's just not clear. There's mention in the loan manual that CDA makes recommendations to the city council, but that's regarding loans, not grants. So that would be my recommendation on this, is to
Right.
make sure that addition is made.
I will amend my motion to approve the facade grant program guideline revisions with the modification that the city council has the final approval.
Reed will resecond.
Okay, and a motion by Alder Finkler and a second by Alder Reed to approve as stated. Any further discussion on this? Alder Lawson.
Yes, so similarly, right, HLPC has final authority of their funds, right?
They do.
So there's an option, if we don't always want to see these at city council, to put that power to the CDA instead. Is that correct?
You could go that way, yeah, you could if you wanted to, and right now, the HLPC policy allows them to approve their facade grant program at the HLPC committee level, commission level.
Further?
There's some pretty stringent guidelines for the CDA to approve the grant monies. And as long as all the checklists are met, I mean, there's a one-to-one match, we see financials, we see plans. I think the CDA should be able to make the final decision on these grants.
Any further discussion? Matt?
I hesitate to bring this up, but there's some humor here. And I agree. I think that the CDA is best positioned to understand and determine award of these grant funds. If this was to be having to come back to council, it would then go from CDA to committee of the whole to the council. And again, where I chuckle and have some humor here is that we're in a position where we're going to let a committee award up to $25,000 in grant funding. But for the council to do that, it'd take a month to go through committee of the whole and the council. And I believe good government is putting this work on the committees and entrusting that your committees do the work that they're charged with doing. But it's just, and I know I'm on my soapbox about committee of the whole, but I hope everyone sees the kind of humor there a little bit. And I think the CDA can move through these quickly, get the money in business owners' hands so that they can make investments into their properties and do so in a timely manner. And that if you did want this to come back to council, it goes to CDA, then committee of the whole, and then council. And that's likely a 6-week process in the best of scenarios.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it. Okay, next on the agenda is to consider and take action on the Beautification Committee's request for approval to sponsor a fundraising project through the painting of garbage cans in the city parks.
Alder Wilkie will move to approve the Beautification Committee's request for approval to sponsor a fundraiser program through the painting of garbage cans in city parks.
I'll second.
Second? Oh,
Okay, motion by Alder Rolke and a second by Alder Lawson to approve Beautification Committee's request. Any further discussion on this item? Alder Reed?
No, I'm feeling comfortable with it now, sorry.
Oh, okay. All right, seeing no discussion, all in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next is to consider and take action on the request of the area veterans organizations to display veterans banners in the downtown.
I'll move to approve the request by area veterans organizations to display veterans banners in downtown.
Reed will second.
Okay, motion by Alder Finkler and a second by Alder Reed to approve the request by the veterans organizations. Any further discussion on this? Michael?
Yeah, so there's no specifics here. I know we listened to the gentleman last time, and I'm not saying it's not a good thing. I think we should do it. But do we need to specify that the display of the banners is at the city administrator or the beautification advisory board's discretion or?
Well, what we're approving is to allow the banners to be displayed.
If there's one group I have trust in doing this right, it's veterans and in displaying their own members and making sure it's done in a tasteful way. And I think, again, it's, if there is an issue, this is likely the 99% versus the 1%. And do we want to legislate to the 1%? If there's an issue, I think we reach out to the veterans organization and ask them to address it. But I don't anticipate they're going to do things, I think, in a way we want and probably above and beyond what we want.
I agree, as long as they have the understanding that, we believe at some point the city will have banners that they want to put up, and so it's not a thing that they will be up year-round, right? Like, at appropriate times, we would
Yeah,
like for the veterans banners to
The
be up.
request was, more specifically to get up, for Veterans Day. Obviously, if we can get them up, where they're up a good amount of time for people to view them. So they would go up prior, maybe a month prior to Veterans Day, and then when the crews put up the Christmas decorations, they would be removing the banners at that time, so.
All right, thanks.
Alder Reed?
Oh, thank you. While I generally am strongly for obtaining pre-approval, I feel very comfortable and confident that they will create something very appropriate for the general public and very positive. I kind of had the same line of thought where I'd just like to see maybe a tiny sentence blurb on display times at city discretion, something like that.
Well, do you want to
Sure, I was just going
continue
to
with your
say,
comment?
yeah, I was just going to say, I have no concerns because I'm pretty sure we talked about this in COW last time, and the coordination of this doesn't need to be at the council level. It can be at the city staff level, and I'm fairly confident that they're competent enough to handle when banners should go up and down.
And if I recall, last COW, we actually talked about being part of the beautifications process for this. I mean, beautification, newer committee, and still trying to, get all their things, their ducks in a row. But I mean, working with utility and DPW staff for the installation and such is, it's not going to be an issue. It's been things that have been done in the past, so. Okay. Alder Wilkie.
I was just going to agree with Alder Finkler and add that they've done it before, and I believe that Mr. Krakow mentioned the last time that they were kind of costly, so they're going to want to protect them against the weather and elements and stuff, so I don't have any concerns about the timeline. I trust them and the city to make the appropriate decision.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next is to consider and take action on the proposal from RIME to provide iPads for the mayor and council.
I'll move to approve the proposal from RIME to provide iPads for mayor and council.
Motive will second.
Motion by Alder Finkler and a second by Alder Motif to approve RIME's proposal. Discussion? Do you have something, Ryan?
Yeah, I do. So we're only gonna get 7 devices. There's 7 of us. That leaves no spares. What happens when I break mine?
You can use mine.
Well, we're going to hope it'd be under warranty and that whatever does happen to it, RIME would be able to replace in the warranty program. We've gotten new devices very quickly when orders have been placed. So I'm confident in their ability to source replacement products as needed. I would hate to have one just sitting around to serve as a spare, just knowing kind of some of our other needs that I think we can timely replace things as needed. And again, these will be put on a 3-year replacement schedule with the rest of our hardware to ensure that we're in best practices for, staying current with technology.
Thank you.
Okay, Alder Lawson.
I mean, I'm going to vote nay just because I think that with the Alder's expense allowance that we have, we can provide our own devices.
Any further discussion?
Just a comment on that. I totally understand that $50 stipend and can provide our own iPads. However, I use that for a separate Alder phone, so that's not, it's not, everybody uses that $50 stipend in a different way. And I think that the decision that we're making is more of a long-term. I have an iPad at home that I could use too. I just think this is with the new software we're getting for agendas and how we're moving forward with technology, I think it just makes sense.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I would ask for a roll call, please.
Reed. Aye. Lawson.
Nay.
Relke.
Aye.
Finkler.
Aye.
Rosted.
Aye.
Motive.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
And then next on the agenda is to take action on the acceptable use policy for elected officials.
I'll move to approve the acceptable use policy for elected officials.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Alder Finkler and a second by Alder Lawson to approve the acceptable use policy. Any further discussion on this item? Alder Rusted?
I didn't see anything on here, like to customize it. I wouldn't say customize it, but to get a cover for it, like Alder Lawson has over there. Is that something that needs to be in here? What the elected officials are allowed to add to the tablet? Because I don't want just a plain tablet laying around in my backpack.
I believe that the proposal came with a Magic Keyboard, which it includes a folio, I believe.
Okay.
If there is a concern, we'll work with RIME to make sure that they're protected, and I believe RIME's accounted for that with the keyboard in the case.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And next is to pay the claims in the amount of $473,317.11.
Alder Motive will make a motion to approve the claims in the amount of $473,317.11.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Alder Motif and a second by Alder Lawson to pay the claims. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Rosted.
Aye.
Motive.
Aye.
Reed.
Aye.
Lawson.
Aye.
Relke.
Aye.
Finkler.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Okay, thank you. And next is report of city officers and police chief. If you can go wherever you want.
Good evening. I asked to be put on the agenda tonight. I just want to give kind of a overview of greater detail of the events of July 4th here. I want to talk a little bit, maybe boots on the ground, just to give you a big perspective of how the depth of this incident was. This isn't a press conference. This isn't more details about, specific details about the case. Anything I'm going to talk about is pretty much known or was said in court. The criminal complaint's been filed, so I'm comfortable talking about any aspects there that I'm going to talk about. So I typed up some notes because I'm going to issue many thank yous again tonight, and I want to make sure I don't miss somebody, even though I probably did. The events of July 4th obviously were very troubling for everybody. including my staff, the community. We all came together and got to a quick resolution that I think says a lot about this community. I want to add that this has been a really tough 5 months for my staff. During the last 5 months, we've had multiple gun suicides. We had a recent fentanyl overdose. We've had locally a fatal car accident. We've responded to others in adjoining jurisdictions. And we've had a couple other very unique death investigations. So it's been a really tough 5 months for my staff, but they're doing really well. We're keeping an eye on them, talking to them. Everyone's doing good. We got the job done that day, and that's what was important. And the aftercare is on my shoulders, and everyone's doing well. I've been asked that a lot by the community. I've been asked that a lot by many of you. I've been asked that by a lot of people, and we're doing well, and we'll get through this. That's a phone call at 1:35 in the morning that I don't want to get, any chief doesn't want to get, is number one, a homicide happened in your community, or perhaps one of your officers are injured or killed. So, especially a community of this size. So it was a little distressing. It was a very brief phone conversation. My response was, I'm on my way. I hung up, and I beat it out the door. As I'm driving to town, I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do once I get here. And fortunately, when I arrived, a lot of those things were already done. Having good qualified staff here, knowing what to do, that's why we train. That's why we train for critical incidents and what we do. But I remember arriving from that distance, it was actually a surreal scene. The amount of emergency lights, the crime scene tape was starting to go up, and the area was pretty densely populated with officers with their long rifles slung over their shoulders, still checking the downtown area. So that's an image that I'm probably not going to forget anytime soon. It was organized chaos is what I would call it. Everyone really, knew what they were doing and had their best performance in mind, I guess I should say. I was briefed by the officers, based essentially what happened, and I immediately got on the phone to the crime lab to request the mobile crime scene response team. They only respond to a very limited amount of calls or limited types of calls. Essentially homicides, death investigations that are very unique, and officer-involved critical incidents, perhaps where maybe an officer was shot or an officer shot somebody. And I made that call, and we not only got one crime scene team, we got two. And they're positioned in 3 spots in the state, Milwaukee, Madison, and Wausau. And I know one of the teams was from Milwaukee, because I know the supervisor, he was out on a previous call. But they responded pretty quickly and did a great job. In my 20.5 years as a sworn police officer, up until February of this year, I've never had to call the crime scene team from the Department of Justice out. So it's been twice in the last 5 months. And I guess that's kind of an eye-opener for me. Also, the search was going on for an interpreter because we had a language barrier immediately. The officers were already taking care of that when I arrived. The Marshall Police Department was the closest jurisdiction that could be here quickly, and they were a great help. The State Patrol also. We put out a request to Dane, Dodge, and Columbia counties for anyone with a Spanish-speaking officer. That included the State Patrol. So we got Marshall PD here. The State Patrol called. He offered me one of his troopers from Richland Center. I took him up on it. He had just completed a 12-hour shift, but responded and also helped. We also implemented a canine for a track to get an idea of where the suspect may have fled, and had a general direction of where he went. And we also had the fire department's drone in the air as well. After we got the information about a path where we thought he went, we reached out to a local downtown business that would probably have the best video footage. This call was probably about 2:30 a.m. and he immediately drove to town and got us some very helpful video. So that kind of put us on the right path. And then also I made almost immediate calls to the mayor and the city administrator. I wanted them to know what was going on in the community here because I think that was very important. I didn't want them waking up to texts or phone calls or turning on the news and seeing live from Columbus, because one of the first things that I was told when I arrived is that the media was on the way. Dispatch was already notified and were inquired by some of the media outlets, so I was preparing for that. The fire department also helped isolate the crime scene. They hung up tarps to protect the evidence that was on the ground and the scene to be processed by the crime lab. We were starting to get bits and pieces of nuggets of video and information. We woke some people up along the path that the suspect ran. It was necessary under the circumstances. Everyone was cooperative. I think given the magnitude of it, I think everybody understood it. Eventually, information came in that helped us pretty much lock in on the suspect, and that was very helpful. So we were immediately monitoring him while we were putting together other things like the search warrant and getting the emergency response team or the SWAT team from the county here. So Lieutenant Ward and Detective Fleischacker from the Sheriff's Department were working on a no-knock search warrant, which is a very rare search warrant. It's one where we just make entry because of the circumstances. And it has to have a very high threshold of a threat in order for a judge to even consider it. And obviously with someone who had just allegedly killed someone and was potentially armed, it was approved. So we got all that in place. Initially, the ERT team responded. We staged them on West Harrison Street by the fire department. They got their tactical gear on. They did their team briefing. They had a map of the building. They responded to the scene and did their operation. Initially, with the help of apartment management, we started to evacuate the building before that even happened, just for everybody's safety. So there are a lot of people involved in this early on. The ERT team did their thing at the apartment. The suspect was not home. Their actions, as I said in my press conference, were streamed live on Facebook Live, and we have confirmed that the suspect did watch it and actually added an emoji to it. So he was not in Columbus when he watched that. So we eventually tracked him down to a hotel in Madison. We reached out to the Wisconsin Department of Justice Criminal Investigation as well as the Madison Police Department, and their response was swift and very substantial. They activated their emergency response team as well. They began an evacuation of the hotel, and as they were doing that, the suspect, obviously from watching the video and looking out his window and seeing all the squad cars, and noticed the activity, walked out of his hotel room with his suitcase, trying to leave, and he was taken into custody very, very quickly and without incident. I have watched that video of the events at the hotel, and it was very professionally done and very safely done. So I'm very pleased with the Madison Police Department and the Department of Justice as well. We also executed a no-knock search warrant, or had one written for his hotel room. The no-knock wasn't necessary any longer because he was in custody, but we did eventually search his room, recover some evidence. Turns out he had initially, and all these things were said in court, so I'm not breaching anything or any confidentiality or sharing any secrets. He had purchased an airline ticket to Texas and mistakenly purchased it the next day. So he was going to wait until the next day in Madison until he realized we were on to him and was hoping to catch a bus somewhere. We almost missed him. So timing was very important and timing was very critical. There's still a lot of work to do on this case, probably go on for months. We've got subpoenas to write, search warrants for records, just various things to do. But it came out really well. You know, in my press conference, one thing I wanted to stress that this was a team effort. And by the team, I mean the first responders and the community, and as well as the business community, and I still mean that. Some of my staff, I want to highlight just their hours that day, because obviously the 4th of July events were going on, and we had a lot of extra hours during those days for us. And we understand and accept that. Lieutenant Ward specifically, who was the lead investigator on this, essentially was here for 29 hours. Got done with his shift at the park about 12:30 in the morning, drove home, got called right back in. Lieutenant Wattoon also worked at the park and then was called right back in, and he was here 17 hours. Sergeant Rozecki was here 19 hours. Officer Dahman worked a 19 and a half hour shift, went home at 2:30 the afternoon of the 4th and came back at 7 to put some time in at the park, 7 p.m. that is. And Officer Trevorrow also worked 16 hours straight, left at about 2:30 and came back at 7 to work at the park with Officer Dahman. So we have some very dedicated staff here. There were 0 complaints. It was very positive. My staff were very, very engaged in this call from start to finish. A lot of other, I'm going to talk quickly about a lot of other thank yous and then delve into the next aspect of this. Some thank yous I want to put out locally to the DPW. We recovered the gun later that afternoon at the bottom of a catch basin under a storm grate, and we reached out to DPW, and they called their staff in to help us, and eventually we had gotten it out just as they were arriving. But they responded, so we were able to do that. Lifestar EMS has always been a great partner. The fire department, helping with perimeter security, setting up a tarp. Also during the parade, they helped staff the intersection by the police department and also helped us close off West Harrison Street so the tactical team could do their thing. Columbus School District, I reached out to them on the 4th. I reached out to administration about inquiring about video from the two schools because his pass was down South Ludington Street and he knew where he lived by then. And I said that, asked them to look at it and get in touch with me in the next day or two in fear of it being overwritten. And they went immediately on the 4th and looked and called me and had some very helpful video for us as well. I talked in my press conference about attending the officers' basic needs. I mean, these are some long hours here. You want to hydrate them, feed them, give them breaks when you can. And everybody was pretty much tied up with a position. At one point, when things settled down a little bit, I gave one of the officers my credit card and I said, go to Quick Trip and buy whatever they got. Let's feed everybody, grab some stuff out of the hot rack, grab some donuts, grab some fruit, some bananas, something. Just bring back a bunch of food. We had our staff to feed, the crime lab team, fire department staff. There were a lot of people. She came back a little while later with a lot of food and handed me my credit card and said that Quick Trip knew what it was for and wouldn't take our money. So I appreciate them as well. It says a lot about this community. So that was very much appreciated. Columbia County Sheriff's Office, I can't say enough about them. The dispatchers particularly, driving in, monitoring the radio traffic that was going on. They did an outstanding job. I'm a former dispatcher. That was the start of my career. So I'm a little understanding of those things, but it was a great job. Their deputies knew what to do. They had the perimeter set up. Things were very secure. They were very helpful. Their K-9 was here. The emergency response team was here very quickly upon request, as well as Detective Fleischacker, who did a great job working with Lieutenant Ward. The emergency response team, after they did their thing, they did a foot search, canvas in the Celtics and Boulevard area, recovered the gun. So that was helpful. Fall River Police Department was here that morning, helped us with the perimeter. Marshall PD was key in interviewing one of the witnesses who didn't speak English. And in fact, he's coming back Thursday night to do a follow-up with one of the primary witnesses who doesn't speak English. So Chief Nault at Marshall PD has been extremely helpful and offered this officer when we needed him again. So that'll be concluded. The Madison Police Department, true professionals from what I've watched. Department of Justice, the Crime Lab, the State Patrol sending us an interpreter from Richland Center, and then they also sent out their TRU, their Technical Reconstruction Unit trooper. They have like 20 of them. That basically does all the crime scene mapping of all the evidence in a very, very fancy professional format. They have all the equipment and the GPS and all the mapping stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing that report as well. The Columbia County Medical Examiner's Office, District Attorney Brenda Yaskell, very, very dedicated to this county as well as this community. We called her in the morning looking for some general guidance, and she said, it's a homicide, I'll be right there. And she was here. And she spent pretty much the whole day here. Helped with the crafting of the search warrants. They have the specific no-knock language in. She went with officers to Madison when he was in custody to see that. She toured the crime scene here, and then also she was going to come to my press conference, but was with one of my officers at the autopsy in Madison. So very committed to this department, very interested, and she said for prosecuting a homicide, she wants to be able to see it and say she's been there versus reading it in our reports. So that was very refreshing. Also want to thank the business community and the residents who provided video. Is an example of how great of a community this is. It really, really is. I also want to thank a large number of people who reached out in various ways to our department, our staff, and me personally. I've gotten phone calls. I've been stopped on the street. I was in Menards in Sun Prairie yesterday, and a resident who I know stopped me and thanked me. And it's a great feeling to be appreciated. The sad thing is, it's under these circumstances. So we have to remember the victim and his family in this as well. And well, as with any critical incident of any first responder agency, we learn some things. Some things maybe we can be a little better prepared for. Nothing critical, nothing I'm the least bit worried about compromising the case. But you have to learn from every incident because you can do better the next time. And with the young staff that we have, it'll be a learning moment about a lot of different things. But again, it's minuscule stuff. Nothing that anyone on the outside would have probably even noticed, but just some things that we could all do differently and some things that I would do differently as well. So, my thank yous for that aspect are gone. Now I want to get into a second part. This will be much shorter. And then I'll talk about National Night Out briefly, and then I'm done. I got asked questions early on about the parade. Why are you having a parade? Why is a parade going on? What are you doing about the parade? At the time of the incident, I really didn't want to show my hands to the media or to the community here. I was very comfortable with the information I had. We knew that there was some sort of confrontation earlier, that this wasn't just a random drive-by shooting, and we had somebody holed up somewhere, just waiting to take out someone at the parade. All indications were that he had fled the scene. We had confirmed that he had been back in his apartment, and we believed he was there when the SWAT team actually responded. But apparently he slipped out without being seen by some of the people some of the neighbors that were helping us keep an eye on him. So as time went on and we did in fact identify the suspect and knew he was in Madison, that was a fair amount of time before the parade started, so I was completely comfortable with the parade going on. I picked a detour route that we went a block around the downtown. I made also early morning phone calls to the 4th of July committee so we could get a grip on this, and I met with them downtown at 7 o'clock, and we laid out the plan. A great, dedicated group of people running that event. It was a nice conversation, and they essentially said, what do we need to do? So that worked out very, very well. Obviously, that we are down 3 full-time positions currently, so minus the homicide, we were going to struggle to staff the parade. There's a lot of intersections, there's a lot of traffic to keep out, and now with the detour, it created a couple of extra positions we needed to staff. Additionally, when I put in for the permit, every year I have to put in for a permit to the DOT to close, because that's Business 151, State Highway 73 through town. Normally I get it back instantly, it's approved. Well, this year there was a little bit of a delay, and then there were some additional conditions put on us for staffing because of the current 2 detours around the city on state highways. So that created a little anxiety for me even before this homicide occurred, but we had it covered. We use an organization from Dane County called DCERT, Dodge County Emergency Response Team. I think I said Dane County. Dodge County Emergency Response Team for years. They're a group of highly trained volunteers that help us with traffic control, and their numbers are a little low this year. So we were going to be able to cover it barely without the homicide, but with the homicide in, we were in trouble. So during the course of the morning, I had multiple contacts with Mayor Hammer. He came down to the downtown area, and we had a conversation, and he wanted to know what he could do to help. And I told him I was concerned about staffing the parade safely. And he told me that he'd make some calls and see what he could do. And in fact, he came through. Normally I handle the parade briefing in the basement every year. I have for the 16 years I've been here full time. And this year I passed it off to Lieutenant Wattoon because I was busy. I ran downstairs to hand him something, and I was pleased at the number of people that I saw. All city employees that Mayor Hammer had contacted who gave up a chunk of their 4th of July to come in and help pull off this safe parade. And I want to mention them by name because I think they deserve it. One of them's in here tonight, Troy Kehoe, his wife as well, Tony Durr, Jake Tanner, Craig Schultz, Jeff Hecht, and Mason Mosher. And I've shared with the utilities director as well my appreciation for them, because it was only with them and the mayor, who also staffed a traffic post, they were able to pull this event off very safely. So I want to thank you personally for this, because it took a little bit of anxiety away from me that day to be comfortable with the event and how it went on. Also that morning early on, the council is familiar with Pete McCormick, who's our local Conservation Warden, who's been here a couple of times, about the UTVs. He called us early on and said, is there anything I can do to help? And he was here immediately, and I gave him a traffic assignment for the parade. So this expands out into many, many jurisdictions. Everybody's willing to help, and it came off very, very well. The fire department also assisted with the parade. They helped us close off West Harrison Street, and one of the fire department staff, close to crunch time, offered to go out, also works for DPW, offered to go out and put up some barricades for us as we were getting close to parade time, because I, quite frankly, didn't have the people to do it. So there's a lot of thanks to go around, and I just wanted to kind of give you guys a boots on the ground view of what exactly transpired that day. You know, I'm very proud of my staff. I'm very proud of the other agencies. I'm proud of this community. The support we've gotten has been awesome, and it's a great feeling. So that'll pretty much wrap up that. So the last thing I want to talk about is unrelated, but just a little summary of National Night Out, which is coming up August 6th, 5:30 to 8 at the park. Very similar to years past. There'll be games, lots of stuff for the kids, free food. There's no cost for anything. MedFlight is scheduled to land. We all know how their schedule goes. Last year they weren't able to make it because of a call. That's obviously a priority. This year we have also scheduled a Black Hawk helicopter from the National Guard to come in. We're going to have, it's going to be similar. Bernie Brewer's going to be here for a while. So we've added some different twists to it, but it's very similar to what it is every year. And I appreciate the council changing the meeting night to accommodate that. So hopefully I'll see everybody there, as well as the community is invited. It's a great event. Every year it draws more and more people. And as everyone knows, in the last few years, the cost for anything has gone up, and that includes funding that event. And I'm very proud to say that the business community here, who we seek donations from, every year has really stepped up this year. We're in a great position financially, and we'll have some residual occurring the next year, which is what we do every year. We roll it over, and so the event is in very good shape. You know, we set the bar kind of high, and we're going to probably keep it where it is, and we'll have to adjust if need be down the road. But for right now, it's going to be very similar, and we're going to try to enhance bits and pieces every year to make it a little more interesting. But I look forward to everybody being there. I want to thank you for your time. You know, usually I like to speak directly because that comes more from the heart, but there's so many things I wanted to mention. I put it on a laptop, so that's pretty much it. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dennis. Matt?
I just, after all that, it probably isn't enough, but I again want to thank Chief for his professionalism, leadership, and communication during an event like that. It's shown how fortunate we are to have Chief and his staff. Also, just on a lighter note, was able to attend the 4th of July, was here for the parade and went to the fest grounds. Want to thank the committee for their work. Again, a great event. And I've shared with Tori Weideman that I want to get involved from a volunteer capacity and be involved with 4th of July organization moving forward, and we'll plan to attend. They have a wrap-up meeting scheduled and kind of share and help them grow and support that event. So that's all I have tonight.
All right, thank you. Again, my thanks to Chief Weiner and the fire chief and all those that had helped out. Thanks to Troy for calling, his people. Thanks for Dalton Hiley for calling his people to help to assist. Extremely sad situation, and as always, I ask that the community extends their prayers to our local, well, not just to the family, but to the police department and other agencies that helped out, because what both agencies within the city have gone through this year so far has just been, they've had to put up with a lot, and they need our prayers. So, thanks again. Tomorrow evening is the next concert of the CHLPC Summer Concert Series, which is a fundraiser for the Rest Haven Project. So hope to see everybody there. It's supposed to be a beautiful night, finally. And then we have been making some contacts to fill positions. but we still do have openings, one opening on the Senior Advisory Board, 2 openings on Cable Commission, 1 opening on Zoning Board of Appeals, and 1 opening on Plan Commission. Again, I have reached out to some people, and there are some that are interested or will think about it, but these are openings that are still available. So with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Alder Finkler and a second by Alder Rosted to adjourn tonight's regular council meeting. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.
Everybody okay with rolling straight through, or do we need a few minutes? Okay, we'll take a couple minutes. 5.
Those books are.
In your copy.
They're ours to keep.
Yeah, yeah.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's Columbus Common Council Committee of the Whole meeting. It is Tuesday, July 16th, and I would take a roll call, please.
Finkler.
Here.
Hammer.
Here.
Lawson.
Here.
Motive.
Present.
Reed.
Here.
Relke.
Here.
Rosted.
Here.
I acknowledge this meeting was posted and noticed according to law.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is to approve the agenda, and I will take a motion for same.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion from Alder Rosted and a second from Alder Motive. Is there any discussion? Okay. Yes.
I guess I'll discuss it now, if it's okay with Attorney Johnson, for number 5. I had asked that Lifestar add interfacility transfers to their report, and I see it didn't make it to this. Okay. Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Is there anybody signed up for citizen comments at this meeting?
There
No.
is not.
Okay. Next item is you'll find department reports included in your packet from the library on 624, Lifestar EMS 624, Police 624, and Treasurer 624. First item for discussion is discuss possible April 2025 referendum for funding of a stormwater utility. Matt?
I'll start, and I think in light of recent flooding, we've had a lot of inquiries about stormwater-related projects and different mitigation efforts, and I think, you know, in talking with the mayor, I think the time is right. We now have a plan. I know the last stormwater referendum, there wasn't a detailed plan. We clearly have a very detailed plan. I think there's 19 priority projects. Is that correct number? So Rupert Milkey's created that plan, and I think I think the critical piece is we know we have stormwater needs in the community, and to identify a funding source that isn't going to compete with roads, park improvements, facility needs, to dedicate that for stormwater is really the recent heavy rains and frequency. I think the time's right to have that discussion.
Are there any questions? Alder Lawson?
Yeah, does anyone recall what the actual referendum question was last time?
Don't have it on me, but
Go ahead.
It was literally one sentence. And Susan and I were just talking about that at the break, so we can resurrect that very easily. And between now and when this actually gets on the ballot, if it's April 2025 or whenever, that is up for the council to decide what the exact words should be. So starting to think about it now is appropriate.
And did we have plans, last time this went out to everyone? Did we have detailed plans on funding?
No.
No. Okay, because I think that's the one thing that I've heard people mention recently is they're against it because there's no plan to fund it and they don't understand how it's going to be funded, or they're afraid it's going to take from somewhere else, or that it's not appropriate to charge a fee versus tax, or vice versa, whatever it is. So as long as we address, I think, all those things, we can.
As I've shared with some of you, in my time in Appleton, early in my career, they were just entering, it was one of the first communities that I'm aware of that was really aggressively looking to manage stormwater, and this was 2000 and then 2004 to 2007. They created a stormwater utility. Number of where it was impactful to me is a number of the projects were occurring in the parks on the golf course because it was land the city owned and could make those improvements at a relatively lower cost. My first council meeting in Whitewater, they approved a stormwater utility. That was 2007. In the when I got to Middleton, Middleton had a stormwater utility. In the time I was there, we had significant flooding, and there was a referendum to increase for a 5-year period of time the level, the amount charged to address some of the flooding recovery and concerns. I missed in my earlier comments that we have scheduled a public information meeting for July 24th at 6 p.m. at the community building, just next door here to City Hall. We welcome and invite the public to come in and participate, learn more. Myself, Jason, I believe the mayor plans to attend, and we'll have a program and kind of answer some of those questions and lay out where we're at and where we want to go, as well as provide opportunity for conversation, questions, that sort of thing.
Paul, did you?
Yeah, to your question, Michael, the city has Chapter 104 of its code, which is titled Stormwater Utility. And this chapter, and the last time that the stormwater utility was brought before the city and before the council, I think things were done kind of backwards. Because you have a whole chapter that says, here's what the stormwater utility is going to do, and here's how it is allocating costs, and here's how it is collecting money. So 104-4 is how the money comes in, and it allocates money to all the residential lots, all the commercial lots, and so on and so forth. So there is words as to how this works. Whether they're the right words, that's a different question. And part of what the council will need to do is educate themselves and go through this to see if any changes need to be made, because it's at least 2 years now, I think. And this was put together in a very odd manner, and a review of this as part of the referendum itself will be very helpful. So that's your homework assignment for the next several months.
Alder Reed?
Oh, thank you. Well, of course, I wish we could get a referendum going almost on the immediate with the very recent flooding very much on people's minds. I think this is a great step. I have a lot of hope this time around. I do want to re-look at the question for the referendum again. I just remember it as being a little confusing in the wording, so just want to make sure we have a gander at it.
Alder Finkler?
I just want to call it that we probably want to do as much socialization of this as we can and public education on this. And it kind of came to light now because this is the first I'm hearing of the July 24th meeting. So I'm sure there's a lot of folks in the public that haven't heard of it either and will want to make sure it's out there. So then, okay.
Alder Rasta?
I know Attorney Johnson said homework, but there's two of us that are up here that have zero recollection or any input from the first time this stormwater happened. 3? So there's 3, it's half. Is there a way the council can meet private and go through it from the start? So we're brought up to speed?
Private?
No.
Like a workshop?
Similar to how we've done some of the other workshops, we can do a workshop on stormwater, and I don't think there's any discussion that needs to occur that isn't of public interest, right? And it doesn't even need to be a workshop. It could be on a future COW just to review the ordinance, review the question that was asked last time, just kind of get everybody up to speed on both of those items.
Perfect, thank you.
Mayor Hammer?
We had, there was an initial meeting, two months ago, May, I believe, and I had asked from this spot here for citizen involvement or any citizen that wishing to attend to give input on that. So we met the first time in May, and then the second time it was posted as a public information meeting. And I believe, Jason, you had brought information that there's over 120 communities now that are stormwater utilities funded separately than what we're allowed through levy limits. So more and more communities doing it because they know that there's the need for it. So I mean, going forward, yeah, obviously we're going to try to get out as many public information meetings, and that this public information meeting kind of was formed fast. So there'll be many more to get citizen input. And you know, it's good to get people at those meetings that aren't necessarily in support of it. I mean, if there's somebody that is in opposition, we'd like to have those people there too to voice their opinion and their, you know, and if they have a reason why. But the unfortunate thing is that we're constricted by levy limits, and in order to take care of things that need to be taken care of, as Administrator Amundson had mentioned, is other funds, you know, through a stormwater utility. So
I'll also share that this has been a frequent topic during the public input sessions we've had on the strategic plan, that stormwater and even you know, related topics have been, you know, kind of in that conversation at the strategic planning level as well.
Jason?
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to add for, you know, Ryan and Michael and Molly for sure. You know, there was a lot of effort done the first time around on this, and it may not feel like it to the community, but, you know, we tried. We had a lot of public meetings. You know, Sarah and Shelley at the time on the council were very instrumental in, you know, helping pull that together. We did get to the point, Michael, where we did calculate impervious area averages. You know, we were looking at fees. I mean, we had numbers. I mean, we got pretty far down the path where, you know, we were rolling out, you know, what we thought annual collections were. We talked about, you know, one of the things that I remember was a big discussion was, how do we get the bills out and collect the money? I mean, as simple as that, right? It's not just the I guess the policy, but it's how do we do it? So I think to your point, Ryan, you know, there is a lot of history there that you know, is good maybe to recapture for people that maybe weren't here last time, new people in the community, things like that, because they're going to have questions. And to Joe's point, some of the best input we have were from people showing up saying, you know, I understand what you're doing, but, you know, you're not considering this, or, you know, we want to make sure you do that. And we were very adaptable to working those responses back into what we were trying to pass. And ultimately the ordinance that Paul said, and I'm sure it still needs some work, but, you know, we have seen certain members of the community out and be very vocal and supportive of this. There's a couple of them sitting in the room right here that I've seen for many years. And we probably only know each other from these meetings. But given that, you know, anything we can do, I'm happy to be part of, because there's just a wealth of knowledge, you know, that we've kind of drum up from this first round. And, you know, I want that to get out to people, because I think the best way to get consideration of this is education. And the more we can have that in a COW or a working session or a public listening session, I'm happy to be at any of those, because we've looked at stormwater a lot over the years. Unfortunately, we just haven't had the funds to do a lot of what we know. So, you know, it's up to you guys, but, you know, we're ready from the staff side, I know, so.
Alder Motive?
I just want to reiterate that the listening sessions were well attended when we tried to pass the first referendum, and I was very impressed with the questions that citizens came forward with, and it was great open discussion, gave us a good springboard. Also would like to say I've still got all the documentation and everything that we did the first time around. Happy to share that to help you, you know, prepare for the next if there's something that you're missing or
Are there any other questions right now? This is probably not one of those things, Matt, that is going straight to the council for a vote. I don't think that was our,
No, this was.
are we all comfortable with the idea of bringing this back? Maybe with
I think
chapter
the-
104-4 in 2 weeks? Or?
The easiest thing is for the next cow to bring the ordinance and the question that was asked the last time and start that discussion about where those are at.
We're all comfortable with that? Okay.
The deadline for the April 2025 referendum is January 25th.
Oh, we got to.
21st, sorry. I knew it was, I was in the ballpark, right? So we have time, but as I'm finding, time is flying, so.
Okay. Next item on the agenda then is to discuss and review proposal from Rupert Milkie related to design of stormwater improvements to Fireman's Park for a possible 2025 construction project. Matt, did you want to start?
We're in the stormwater portion of the committee of the whole meeting here. So we've had a number of residents. This has been a project that's been, Jason knows the history, but it's been talked about a lot. I know Jason is going to say this, I'm going to reiterate it as well, and a lot of the residents that we've talked to are aware of this as well. This is not a solution that is going to improve, across the board. All of a sudden, our stormwater concerns are addressed. This is a project that would remove the existing pipe and look at a more natural stormwater management solution, which it has been very popular, and I was involved in a lot of work on this in my time in Middleton. These kind of efforts where you're looking at increasing flood storage, natural vegetation that fits in a wetland situation. And so I'll let Jason discuss more about what their work and what this scope looks like, and stop talking. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Matt. Yeah, this project is in the comprehensive study. It is one of those priority projects. It's probably not the number one project we identified from our score and our rankings, but it's up there, and it's up there for a few reasons. One, obviously, it does impact the park. There is some long-term maintenance issues with this pipe collapsing and DPW having to repair it over the years. There's the capacity issue. Again, I'm just going to throw out some general numbers. The pipe can hold 100 cubic feet a second flow. We have 800 coming down there when it rains really hard, so it only carries about an eighth of what the capacity of the creek is giving us right now. That has increased over the years, and there's discussions of why. I'm not going to get into that tonight, but so we put together a task order at Matt's request to do the design. I know this has been kicked around and talked about as a project. This goes kind of hand in hand with some of the dredging and widening of some of the creek throughout the corridor. But we kind of felt like this project was one that I know residents have asked for, this is a good starter, right? Why not this one? So when Matt asked for this, we spent some time, we've looked at this culvert removal before from a engineering perspective, but we really haven't looked at, what's the effort to remove it. And, this is a pretty complex project, as simple as it seems. There's a lot of agencies involved, FEMA from the flood perspective, the DNR from the environmental perspective. You'll see on the agenda after this, there's one of the things that I brought up very early when Matt asked about this is I said, okay, if we're going to take that pipe out, we're going to create a channel that's going to split the high school parking lot from the football field, the aquatic center from the baseball field. We're going to split Fireman's Park in two. That's a big deal. I don't think we have an idea of how to do that without some planning and some forethought. So that component is in here. This permit process is, I've done these before, it's at best 6 months, working with the federal agencies and the state agencies. There's contamination potential issues, there's endangered species, there's all kinds of things we have to deal with. So we have to follow the rules, but we can get it done. And if we start now, I think there's plenty of time to look at a 25 construction. We've had this estimated. We've had contractors look at it. We've had pricing given, but we haven't had a real detailed plan, and that plan could vary, so the pricing could vary a little bit too. And so I think what this task order does, if you kind of look through it, we've broken it into sections. Some data collection and some planning, so talking about what we're doing to the park, looking at, how to make this design compatible. The survey piece is locating that pipe. Anybody who believes that pipe is a straight pipe underneath the ground is fooling themselves. There's about 8 kinks in it that we know of, or we think we do. So we're going to have to figure out exactly where that is so we can take it out and restore the natural channel to where it is supposed to be. There's design and permitting. We have to design this in a way that we're not raising the floodwaters either upstream or downstream per FEMA guidelines, so they will not permit it unless we do it a certain way. So there's some design work in that. There's the plan development, and then there's the permitting piece, and that's where there's some preliminary meetings with the DNR. There's involvement with FEMA. There would be a conditional letter of map revision that we would have to file with them up front, telling them that we're going to alter the channel in the floodplain. And those are the things that take time to get approved. There's an individual Chapter 30 permit, which is the DNR saying if you're going to be digging in our waterway, you have to get that approved. And that all leads us to bidding, which is really kind of the crescendo of we've done all of this work. Contractors have looked at it. We have somebody interested in doing it. What's the number? And then that really gives us a snapshot of, does this make sense? We're going to borrow this. Now you're kind of at the decision of let's move this forward. If we start now or, shortly from now, we would be on a schedule, and that's in the back of the task order, to start and have this wrapped up and bid right around the first of the year. It's a great time to bid. I always love that. You guys know every time I come in here with a January bid, I got great prices. I would hope to have the same here. And then obviously the construction would be kind of up in the air as far as timeline. I think we've put a couple months in there. The one thing that we're going to deal with in construction, and I don't want to get the cart before the horse, but we have to bypass pump this water around the culvert when we dig the new ditch. And, obviously if we have any rain events, you can only imagine the difficulty with trying to pump, because we just physically can't with that volume of water. So strategically, we're going to have to think about, is this an early spring, or where do we hit the window, or give the contractor enough time to stage up. And so again, complexity to this project, but it's certainly doable. So this kind of covers everything from my perspective to get you from today through, I got a bid I'm asking you guys to review and approve to move the project forward. So that's what's in our task order tonight. So I guess with that, do you have any questions about that process or what we're proposing?
Alder Lawson?
Yeah, just 2 small things. I noticed that in the planning phase, there is a reference to the park plan kind of coordination stuff, but then not again in the design phase. I'm assuming that would still happen during the design phase, though.
Yeah, so, I would look to defer to the park expert to tell me what makes sense from, how this should interact with the park. And if he says we should have a bridge, then a bridge. If he says we should have a pipe, then, a larger diameter pipe or some, and so what's not in my task order, though, is if he says a bridge and somebody's got to design a bridge, right? That's not in here because we don't know. So that would be something that we would have to kind of look at as to where that solution comes out. So right now, we're just coordinating to say we can adjust our design to coordinate whatever is recommended by the park planner. But whatever that design ultimately becomes, it could be 2 bridges, it could be 1 large bridge. I don't know what that is yet. So I think at that time we would decide, who does that design, whether it's our firm or maybe the planner or somebody else has that capability. I'm not married to the fact that, I have a predetermined notion of what that should look like and that we'd be designing it. So that would be something that is not in this task order. But, at some point somebody would have to do some work.
So you could, we could have a change order then, if appropriate, for you to do some of that work, again, if appropriate for you to do it.
Yeah, and again, without knowing what that looks like, it's really hard to put a number or a scope on that, so.
The other item I saw that's an excluded item is grant submission or financial support.
Yeah.
Do we normally exclude that kind of thing in these situations?
Well, specifically, if we think there's viable means to get a grant for this type of project, we may include it. You know, in going in, okay, there's a program that has funding available that this would fit. We've kind of looked at this and said, you know, there is some grant funding out there, to be frankly honest, that we identified, but I think it funds up to like $20,000 on a $800,000 project. You're probably going to spend, I don't know, $3,000 to $5,000 writing a grant application if you're hiring us to do that. At this point, we didn't include it because we didn't think it was worth the effort. That's not saying staff can't if they got extra time. I'm sure Matt doesn't have anything to do, you know, and so maybe, you know, there is possibility, there is some things out there, but we did not include it, Michael, so.
All right, thank you.
Alder Reed?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to see this in the works. I think this will be a necessary step. Fireman's Park has been having a lot of issues with the flood water. I'm afraid it'll probably wind up being some tear-jerking proposal amounts that'll come up. I mean, I know it'll easily cost tens of thousands of dollars just to pump water while the work is being done, but I think this is necessary to at least find out what would be needed.
Alder Finkler?
I just want to call out during planning to maybe have a risk identified of potentially going late and 4th of July. I see that the project closeout is July 1st, which I know the completion's on 6/15. But if we have the type of spring that we had this year, that could easily go into 4th of July. And I'm not sure what kind of impacts that would have, but just keeping that in mind.
I'll order a drought.
I'm not sure we would go that far.
I'll try.
Oh, man. Are there any other questions at this time? No? Is everybody comfortable moving this along? Okay. Jason, do you have what you need from us tonight?
Yeah, I do, but I'm gonna hang around for the park
Great.
stuff, just out of curiosity.
Okay. On this item, do you have what you need for us on this? Okay. Next item is to discuss and review proposal from Parkitecture and Planning for master plan for Fireman's Park.
So as Jason alluded to, this potential project creates some challenges in terms of the park. And I reached out to someone I worked with in the past and coincidentally has done kind of this similar work in other communities in working in tandem with Rupert Milky as well. And I think what they're good at the park part, but I think where they excel is the community input portion of design in past projects that I've done with them. And what I look at this work is it will not only address, you know, the impacts of the stormwater project, but it really will set a future for Fireman's Park and look at how the public interacts with the park, how this stormwater is going to change, and look at the stormwater as an amenity in the park. And I think that's where their ability to work with Rupert Milky will really lead to a great project when we're said and done.
Does anybody have any questions? Alder Motive?
So the cost of this then would be built into the budget for next year?
So we had, you'll remember the borrowing that we had went through, that exercise. There's money in there for this stormwater project. How we end up funding this, I think will get fleshed out during, so there's money for the design, I guess is what I'm trying to say. How we fund the actual improvements, I think will get worked through during our capital improvement discussion as we move through the budget process, because this could be funded through borrowing, this could be funded through the potential creation of a new TIF district. There's different ways that this could be, it could be funded potentially from enacting a stormwater utility. I think it just depends on sequencing and how everything moves forward and ensuring that, I think the whole discussion about why TIF or why stormwater utility, we want to maintain our borrowing ability for the other projects that we know are on the horizon. And as we saw, we're in good position. I'd like to make sure that we stay in good position in terms of the audit report when it comes next year or 2 years from now.
Alder Wilson?
Yeah, so the letter here says that they'd have designs in late summer and budget estimates for integration into the capital improvement plan in the fall. Is that early enough to make it into our budget planning?
No, we'll have to have some placeholder items and be flexible with that. And again, some of what the master plan for the park calls out are going to be immediate and have to be tied to the stormwater, and some may set up, future CIPs for other improvements that make sense. Like, one of the things that might look at is where's the right place for a playground when the playground's redone at the park, and how do these changes impact the future improvements to the park, and what makes the most sense?
Does anybody else have any other questions? We're comfortable moving this forward? Okay. Thank you. Next item is discussion and update on the Rest Haven project at Fireman's Park.
Henry Elling is here from HLPC. I just kind of want to introduce this as, so there's been, I think this project goes back to 2021 where there's an obvious need for updates to the Rest Haven, and HLPC kind of took this project on and has been working and fundraising for these improvements that have primarily been focused on updates to the restrooms. In terms of where this is at, the project was bid. Bids came in rather high, and the bids were rejected. And so there's been some ongoing discussion and in review in both Mike Kornman and myself being new, talking through this with Paul, and again, I think the understanding is clear. We've approved an environmental review to look at the phase one analysis to determine how renovations would proceed, but the actual work on the building will need to be publicly bid again moving forward, as the funds are deposited with the city and therefore have to follow the same public bidding rules and guidelines. And so I'll let Henry, I know he's prepared to talk about this, and there may be some questions and further discussion as well.
Good evening, everybody.
Mike.
There we go. Good evening, everybody. Henry Elling, I'm the secretary at the CHLPC, who has been working diligently since April of 2021, when the council authorized us June of 2021, when the council authorized us to go forward with an architect to do some background work and planning for upgrades to the Rest Haven building. I didn't know that this was going to follow planning for Fireman's Park, but it's almost a perfect dovetail, because the question that our committee has is, how far should we go with this building in terms of renovations and staging of those improvements? We took the bull by the horns back in June of 2021 and did a design for basically the entire building to upgrade. It started with redoing the bathrooms that were original to the project in 1925,
1923 is when they approved the building. And that led into heating the building, and that led into air conditioning the building, and that led into upgrading the electrical and the HVAC, as you can imagine, and that led to insulating the building. So when we did bids in May of 2023, only one bid was returned and complete, and that cost was a mere $625,000. So as you can imagine, the committee said that's not realistic. We don't have anything close to that amount of money. So that bid was formally rejected, and everything is clean as far as that first program is done. We certainly recognize the process that we're going to have to go through in terms of design, public bidding, public information, and acceptance ultimately by the City Council of some type of a contract to do the work. We've had another contractor go through and try to break out, I'll call it phases, for the project so that we could divide up and conquer over time. But the challenge with that is chicken and egg, or water service versus heat. And so it really has become a question of direction from your group as to what your expectations are overall for this building, how it coordinates with other activities in the park, long-term, what other things might be happening in this area, and, to be very blunt, what other funding sources are available. We've been working on fundraising for this project since it was accepted by the City Council in 2021, and we currently do have a fund that's audited and reviewed every year by the city of $87,000 towards this project of $625,000. We have been applying for nominal grants of $5,000 to $7,000 that have been approved, but again, those are for specific elements of the project. To do a handicap accessible door, to do specific things with electrical panels to make parts of the building more functional. We don't have a project at this point that we can take to a grant application and say, we have half the money, so we're eligible for these project grants. It's nothing that we've been able to find in terms of direction that the sky is going to open up and there's going to be this bucket of money for us to do. So we wanted to update you because only two of you were on the council when this was originally authorized back in 2021, make you aware of this project, have you understand our commitment to it, but also get some direction from you as to how this falls in the bigger picture of both Fireman's Park and the city's capital program, because obviously this is one of several buildings in the city that you are ultimately responsible for maintaining, and we'd just like to be part of that discussion.
Alder Motive?
First, I want to thank HLPC for all of their hard work. The design is great. I know you guys have put a ton of effort into it, and the city is thankful for that and for the amount of money that you have raised towards this substantial project. However, with the timing of this, I think that it is time for the city to include this in the Fireman's Park potential revisions that they're doing there, so that it's all integrated and done at the same time. And you have enough money to help contribute to something like the proposal for park tech, that kind of thing. And I think that they could help with that greatly. So I think it's time for the city.
Alder Lawson?
Do the funds that you've raised have to be spent on this property?
Well, that's the beauty of what we are able to talk with individuals and tell them that it will be used specifically for this activity. the people that have given money towards the project, and this is not our first rodeo. We did work on the pavilion, we've done work on the city hall, we've done work on the old water tower up by the cemetery, and we have a track record as a commission that we do a project and people donate to that specific project knowing that the money won't be sent over to do something on a different project. And that's partly because our focus is just the historic preservation element. We don't have to deal with a public fire station or city hall. So we are able to focus that intent, but to answer your question specifically, our expectation is that the money's to be used for that building, and that's the expectation of the people that gave us the funds.
Other questions? Alder Rostad?
I would disagree that we should ask them, the HLPC, to pay a portion of the study for the 17,000 that's proposed in the previous on the agenda.
I just want to clarify, I don't think anyone was asking HLPC to pay for any of this stuff.
Oh, that's what I heard too. I heard from Sarah. I just said they have enough money to help with that, or to something with the rest here.
Alder Reed?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I definitely want to keep the Rest Haven project separated from the park stormwater project. The only coordination I would want to make sure we have is that the Rest Haven won't be blocked off at the time that they're trying to do renovations because of our project for some reason. And I just want to thank the HLPC for all of their amazing hard work and the fundraising they've been doing forever for so many major projects. It's just really awesome that we have this in the community.
Alder Finkler?
Is the Boy Scout cabin part of the architecture conversations?
So to explain the architecture conversation and what their work is going to do is look at what is the impact of stormwater? How do we make the stormwater improvements feel like a beneficial part of the park? And then how does the rest of the park interact? How do you connect? And then looking at potential, like how I see Rest Haven or the Scout Cabin or the Pavilion is really in terms of access and what an accessible route looks like and ADA compliance and those kind of things that the master plan is going to look big picture at those things. In terms of physical improvements to the Scout Cabin or Rest Haven or other facilities, no. But it may look at, if this is implemented, here's a good place for the playground. Here's where parking, if you're going to add parking in the future, here's where parking should be. Those kind of decision points. And I want to back up and just say, and I think this isn't lost on you, but for the last 24 years, a project like Rest Haven would have been my responsibility. And I agree with everything that's been said about HLPC, their work, the ability to fundraise, but I also feel like the city has let them do this and it's kind of not given up the responsibility, but as Henry pointed out, the city has a responsibility here. This is a city facility. And if this is a priority as we go through our budgeting process, we need to figure out how to work with HLPC and not just expect that a citizen committee is going to pull off this project, right? And how can we assist, whether that's in terms of staff support, whether that's in terms of financial support, but that it's seen as more of a partnership. Because I think those are win-win. When you can get, and as I've shared with HLPC, oftentimes in my past, when you get a community group that's willing to raise half of the money, okay, and then the city contributes the other half and makes it work, right? that leads to the next project success. Because now people know they donate to something and get to a certain level, and the city is going to step up and meet them there. That's a really way to kind of further the philanthropic support in a community if you're willing to meet a group halfway.
Alder Lawson?
What?
I'm sorry, Alder Finkler.
Yeah.
So with that said, I do not agree with including this in with the architecture work at all, and I'm also with you, Matt, and I was kind of getting us down that road anyway, is this should be considered with prioritization of all the other buildings that the city is responsible for and should be worked into and talked about through budgeting. And I do also agree, like, we should all be like super thankful of the $87,000 that was raised towards this substantial project. And I think that the vibe I was getting is this is kind of fallen on HLPC to, carry this, and I'm glad it's come back because I don't think that's fair since we're responsible for the building. But with that said, we do have to take it into consideration with all the other buildings we're also responsible for and prioritize that and talk through it during budgeting.
Alder Lawson.
So I agree with everything you said. However, what happens if during that prioritization, this just isn't a priority for the next year, 3 years, whatever? How do we help, how to help HLPC move forward and, get maybe some things done without committing $500,000 that maybe the city doesn't think should be committed there now?
Alder Motive?
That would be, there's the staff time to help with planning and moving it along. And it may be 3 or 4 years as it is now. They've done such a wonderful job at fundraising, but it's taken a couple of years to only get, a quarter of the funding. So it'll be a couple of years even as a joint partnership.
Again, precursor to a later agenda item tonight, but we're going to start the CIP discussion on August 5th, and I think this naturally flows into that and look at what does 5 years look like, what are our priorities, what is realistic, and then turning to a partner like Ellers and saying, what does this look like? Where does this put us with this borrowing level? Because we saw tonight, we're below our policy. I don't know what comfortability level the council has in looking at that. But again, I also know that if this project is a priority, on HLPC's part, fundraising is a lot easier knowing we need to get to this number and the city's going to match it. That's a much easier capital campaign than the situation you're in right now.
And part B of that would be when we get that amount of money, this is the work that we can accomplish. It may not be 100% of the project, but it will be new bathrooms, new electrical, and a front door that is handicap accessible. Well, that we can sell because that's showing progress. And then knowing within the 5 years after that there's going to be HVAC work done or other things because it's going to be other projects between, then we can continue to work on those with you as well. And our goal is to be an assist to you folks advocating for specific projects or buildings along the way. There's a big group of guys over on Ludington that are advocating for a certain type of building and a replacement for that. There's other folks that are advocating for other major projects, and that's up to you to balance all of those, and that's just fine, as long as you know that we're not expecting to argue with you, we're expecting to say, here's how we can help. So that was our purpose in coming this evening, is to say, here's where we're at. We'd like you to consider this as part of your conversation going forward and know that our work is not going to stop in terms of fundraising. We just need some focus and some direction from you as to the level of importance and maybe how much you can help along the way. And certainly having Mike and Amy Jo as part of our support system has been wonderful, and being able to go back and forth with them on these things has been very helpful. So,
Thank you for your willingness to partner with the city and to work together and continue to fundraise.
well, we're not partnering with the city, we're part of the city. And we need to remember that and be part of that every step of the way. Keep you informed as we're going forward, and also identify for the public that while the money may be focused on a specific project, it's for the benefit of the entire city.
Thank you.
Alder Reed?
Well, thank you. Well, I do think it's important for the city to do a much better job in helping to fund the different projects for maintaining the city buildings. I also just want to make sure we're careful not to get in the way and block special projects that the CHOPC has been able to fundraise for. They may have a donor that wants to, put in a couple, like $10,000 or $100,000 on a specific building that they have an interest in, but might not have been high on the city's priorities. So I just want to make sure that we don't inhibit them.
Well, if I may, we want to be part of the process as you consider a capital improvements plan. And our goal, and I hope your goal at the end of that, is we all address in rank order what the priorities are. So if someone does come to us and say, well, project number 17, I'm willing to give you $10,000, we say, well, thank you very much. It's going to sit in the bank for 5 years. It's not our intention to overstep and leapfrog projects just because we can bring in $10,000. You need to give us the direction as to what the priorities are so that we're working with you as part of the organization, not in opposition or contravention to you just because we think it's important. We need that direction so that we're working with you going forward.
Are there any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Thank you for your time. We'll have folks at your capital improvement meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is discussion related to the disposal sale of the wastewater Vector truck.
There is a memo here from Jacob. The Vector truck, we are anticipating the arrival of the newly ordered truck this month, which leaves us with an extra vehicle that Jacob outlined both a putting out to auction, as also we have a offer to purchase at market rate from the city of Ripon. So most of you will know that we have a former staff member who's now in Ripon who's familiar with the equipment. It'd be my recommendation that we put the vehicle out to auction consistent with past practice. And Ripon would have every opportunity to bid on the unit.
Alder Rossett?
I would agree going to the auction per the policy, but I would, I think we should get a resale value of it and put that as a reserve. Let Ripon know what the reserve is. I mean, I think it should be public knowledge. You could put that in the description on the surplus. Yep. And then that way, if we can make $1 to offset the new truck, whether it's a ratepayer side or the taxpayer, I think it'd be beneficial. Because I believe you can set a reserve on surplus, so that'd be my recommendation to add to Matt's.
Are there any other questions, comments? Is everybody comfortable with moving that forward then? Okay. Next item is discussion of the 2025 budget process and timeline.
So, yeah, I worked with Crystal on the kind of outline calendar, whatever you want to call it, that was in the packet. Basically, Tonight kind of marks the kickoff of our budget process by kind of having the schedule in front of you, looking for any comment or feedback, but it's our intention to kick off with department heads tomorrow morning, and Crystal has information for them and their instructions. First start of work on the operating budget. As most of you know, we've had staff working on the capital budget and have that in a position to come to you in a draft format. That's going to be a working document. We want some input, feedback at the August 5th meeting of the COW to discuss the capital budget, what the priorities are, and that's going to be how I've seen the capital budget is it takes a couple months just to work through cost estimates, knowing, okay, these are our 25 projects, and really getting better detailed numbers as we move forward once we get those priorities. But then this lays out kind of a process of the department heads will submit their budgets. Crystal, myself, and the mayor will meet with each of the department heads, go through their department budgets. Then we'll make recommendations and bring those back in a work session in September, the second meeting in September. October 1st, authorizing a public hearing. Date of publication, October 14th. We've got an extra committee of the whole meeting if needed on October 15th. That we'd have public hearing and deliberations October 29th with an adopted, approved budget, hopefully the November 19th meeting.
Any questions, comments? Is everybody comfortable with that timeline? All right, excellent. Next item on the agenda is update on strategic planning process.
All right. As you're aware, we've had 2 staff input sessions and 2 public meetings, input sessions for community members to attend. We've also on the website had a form with the questions that have been asked that people can submit. We've had okay attendance at the public meetings. We've had, I think, a really good response on the online submittals. I don't have a total number, but every day it seems like about 20 total submittals from the online. So we've got a data set, and I don't think there's been anything earth-shattering in most of the information we've heard. But they've been really good discussions, both with community members and the staff. And so I've tried to outline kind of the next step, and what we intend to do is hold a public meeting where we talk about these priorities. These are consistent things that we've heard. So organizational culture, sustainable growth and development, communication and engagement, and financial sustainability. With each of these 4 priorities, we'll develop specific goals and objectives for implementation, along with metrics for measuring how we're doing on those items. We've also identified strategic themes. They're public safety. Basically, the community is viewed very favorably, very safe, very family friendly, and we want to make sure that we protect and enhance that as the community grows. Quality of life has been a big theme, in that we invest in culture and recreation spaces, transportation improvements, increase access to nature, including the Crawfish River. It's been mentioned, I think, almost at every meeting we've held. City facility planning, again, we know this is an item. We need to plan for the future of our buildings, prioritize projects, and ensure investments are made with long-term future needs of the community. Business and residential development, again, has been these are themes we hear repeatedly in these sessions. Focus on business retention, downtown and residential development, explore opportunities to create a business park, and ensure that financial incentives are available for desired projects. And then community cohesion, this is one that I'm forcing upon things, but we've also heard this. But we've heard the engagement and with residents and having residents more involved in the decision-making process. What I want to see is that we develop a culture and appreciation for understanding difference of opinion, and that oftentimes I think if we work towards a point where we can see why someone has a different opinion, it creates better discussion and ultimately a better end process. So Amy Jo has talked about past planning efforts have developed this concept of root for Columbus. And I really like the concept, whether that is the right saying or there's something else that comes through this process. We need to develop a rallying cry for the community, so to speak, and that we're working in the same direction. So I referenced goals earlier. The ideal is to take these priorities and themes to a public input meeting and develop goals under each one of them. And what I've become, I don't know if it's now a hobby, but reading other cities' strategic plans. And so I've ripped these goals from their strategic plans as examples that we can share in a public meeting of, you know, kind of what we want to, where we want to get to. Some of this might get incorporated, but the reality is what are our goals and then how are we going to measure them? So that's kind of what I'm envisioning as the next step of this process. Is it going to be one meeting? Is it going to be more than one meeting? I think that's still to be kind of worked out as we kind of organically work through this process. I don't have a date, a time, or a location, all things that I need to still figure out, but kind of want to update you on what we're thinking in terms of the next process in the strategic plan.
Anybody have any questions for Matt?
Headed in the right direction. I know some of you have been able to attend the input sessions. We haven't let you really say anything or do anything at them. But you've been able to observe, and that's important as well.
Alder Lawson.
How do we get, with timing wise, this intertwined with the capital improvement plan?
It's so in a perfect world, we'd have a strategic plan done and wrapped up right now. Not a perfect world. You're dealing with new people, lots of moving parts, and there's nothing that says when we have a budget document finalized and approved and adopted that we can't come back in and look, all right, here, this budget item aligns with this strategic plan priority. And that ultimately we do that, but they're going to have to go kind of forward in concert right now because I don't want to rush either of the processes that need to kind of occur. One of my hopes is to kind of put together an interested parties group that's kind of cross-representational of the community, that when we get a draft strategic plan that I can run this by them, meet with them, and say, are we headed in the right direction before we even bring that to council? So there's steps to this, right? And I want to make sure that we've got a plan that it's actionable and we can put it in place, but that also that we're realistic, and this is the toughest part of this, is that we're realistic about what we can accomplish in 3 years' time. So I don't know that I answered your question because it's a good question, but we're gonna, in 2 weeks' time, we're gonna be talking about our capital improvement budget, and what I think is realistic there, and one of the really unique things is I'm seeing, and is Crystal, she left, so she'll appreciate this though. Our staff are very realistic in their expectations of what they can get funded in next year's capital budget. And so that's been ingrained. And like, let me tell you, in Middleton, this was an all-out fight amongst department heads on trying to get as much into the CIP, and most of our department heads are submitting one project. And so that's a reality of what we're able to fund, but it's not a reality of what our needs are. And so as we meet with staff, we've got to talk about, you know, how we make sure that we're not kicking the can down the road, as we've talked about. And one of the really obvious places that I can see is equipment replacement. If your equipment replacement is humming, you're turning vehicles over and your resale value is at its highest point, right? And that you're able to reinvest that and keep your fleet in a really tip-top shape where you're not spending as much money maintaining vehicles, you're turning them over at their highest point of resale, and that it's a plan that makes sense. And so we're a long ways from that, and it's gonna take time to get to that point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we've kicked a lot of cans, and I'm just afraid that if folks are too conservative, we may continue to kick some cans we shouldn't any longer.
Right, and so that's, as Crystal and I meet with the department heads, that's gonna be one of those conversations about, you know, if, okay, you've got your one thing that you wanna do next year, what would number 2 be? You know, and at least having some other items to talk about, because like, and again, I know that we will be challenged to fund every top project, right? So the idea of a second is, you know, I get that it's a wasted time in some people's eyes, but I think it's a necessary conversation.
It is, and I think it's helpful to understand that there are times where that second item might package well with someone else's first item, and you know, it may save us money by doing it that way.
Yeah, and the other piece to this is what's submitted to this point is a 5-year look. It's not just for 25. We've asked each of the departments to look at what are your 5-year needs, and so now we can start looking and projecting out and working with Ellers on borrowing plans that are, you know, in our best interests.
Well, and just to clarify, our worksheet actually goes out 10 years, and anything going on that list is not coming off. It's just gonna get into a location where you can see it at any point in time. It's all in there, and you can move them around by year. We can figure out what's, you know, move them by priority. So it's all together in one place, and we can see it together as a group. And then nothing will get like lost. It's, if you didn't put it in there, then you better get it in there, because we're gonna have it in there until it's done.
I'd be remiss not to point this out. In the discussion earlier about the audit and staffing, I'll just highlight this second segment here where conduct organizational assessment, create a long-term staffing plan that meets and maintains city obligations and commitments, develop department training plans as part of the annual budget process, establish cross-training opportunities across departments, develop employee engagement survey plan, conduct an annual survey to measure engagement, create succession plans with all departments, create department strategic plans every 5 to 8 years. So that's one we can copy and paste and probably put in our final, but again, we'll let that happen organically through that public process.
Thank you, and sorry I stole that thunder.
No. When I see good ones that I know fit, I'm like, copy, paste, I've got a Word document of potential goals, so.
Are there any other questions? Okay, at this time, I would take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.